Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today on family dynamics and caregiving, navigating relationships with less stress. We want to welcome everyone to the Ontario Caregiving Organization's webinar series, as these webinars bring together caregivers and subject matter experts to explore topics of interest to caregivers. We do this to support and engage chosen family, friends, and neighbors who are caring for someone. My name is Susan Pullian, and I've been a volunteer with the Ontario Caregiver Organization for over 5 years now. I'm also a caregiver myself and a lifelong learner. I'm pleased to be your moderator for today. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the lands that we are on today. While we meet on a virtual platform, I want to acknowledge the importance of the land, which we each call home. I'm joining you today from Milton, Ontario, which is part of the Treaty Lands and Territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. If you'd like to learn more about the lands that you're joining us from, you can learn more at native-land.ca. As I mentioned, our webinar today will be on family dynamics and caregiving, how to navigate relationships with less stress. We are pleased to have two presenters joining us today for the webinar. First is Brenda Davie. Brenda is a professional caregiver coach. Brenda founded her coaching company, Silent Heroes, in October 2017. She's a certified caregiver consultant with over 30 years of experience and has been a coach with the Ontario Caregiver Organization since 2021. For over 9 years, Brenda cared for her mother, who lived with dementia. She believes her caregiver experiences only deepened her ability to serve as a family caregiver coach. We will also have Jennifer Berry join us later in the presentation. Jennifer is a recently retired teacher of 28 years and a mother of 2 beautiful boys. She is a volunteer for OCO, the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence, Epilepsy Peterborough, Terry Fox Foundation, and the Peterborough District Sports Hall of Fame. In her volunteer roles, she has assisted caregivers one-on-one and co-facilitates a support group. Jennifer's oldest son, who had chronic and complex medical and cognitive needs, passed in September 2024. She was his primary caregiver, decision maker, advocate, and mom for 23 years. Her caregiver role for her son involved advocacy at the local, provincial, and federal level to get appropriate housing, supports, volunteer and work experiences, and educational opportunities to meet his very complex needs. We will look forward to having Jennifer join us later. We will begin our presentation today with Brenda. Thank you for joining us, Brenda, and I'm happy to pass over the mic to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Our topic for today is going to be on family caregiving and dynamics. And the idea is that family dynamics do influence the how caregiving responsibilities are shared. And family dynamics can be rewarding, but also challenging depending on family dynamics. It's important to acknowledge that while the presentation today discusses general family dynamics and caregiving, it does not address the situations involving abuse. So families experiencing these challenges may require specialized support beyond the scope of this discussion. One of the ideas here is it is relevant that we take a look at caregiving before diving into family dynamics. And so who are those caregivers? And so caregivers, yes, while they are ordinary people, they often take on very extraordinary things. I want to just talk a little bit here about the types of caregiving. And we're going to take a look at these types through the ages. So a person who might be a child doing child caregiving could be under the age of 18. Children or teens who provide care are often called young caregivers or young caregivers. An example of this might be like a 14-year-old who is helping their parent with a chronic illness by preparing meals and maybe helping with household chores, or even a teenager caring for siblings while a parent works multiple jobs. Or a child can even help their grandparent by, helping with groceries or assisting with walking. When we go to the next category of young adult caregiving, that's about the ages between 18 to 29. And this stage often balancing early career, school, and caregiving. So for example, you might have a 22-year-old student scheduling and driving a parent to chemotherapy, or a 28-year-old a 28-year-old working adult helping a sibling with autism navigate daily life tasks. Then we go into the next category, adult caregiving over the age of 30. Adults between the, I will say, the ages of 30 or 50 often are represented with what we call like the sandwich generation, caring both for children and aging parents. So here you might have, for example, a 40-year-old juggling raising children and supporting a parent recovering from surgery, or a 35-year-old coordinating care for an adult sibling living with a disability. And then as we get into the other age range, older adult caregiving, we may be looking at 55 plus. Older adults who may be retired or near retirement often care for spouses, partners, or friends. And here in another example, you might have a 16-year-old caring for a spouse with dementia, or a retiree providing support to a friend in recovery. Again, I want to just talk about some of the common challenges that can be happening in caregiving. When we're talking about ADL, that's activities of daily living, and IDAL, that's instrumental activities of daily living, you might be providing support in this way. For those activities of daily living, a spouse might be helping their partner bathe safely to prevent falls, or an adult child might be assisting a parent with dressing due to arthritis. When we come to things like instrumental activities, we're dealing with things like you might be having to organize the pill boxes and monitor daily dosages schedules, or driving a parent to multiple medical appointments, or taking over bills due to cognitive decline. Medical issues. So, beside not only having a disability or condition, you might be managing things on top of the illness, such as managing diabetes, the blood sugar, the insulin injections, or post-stroke rehabilitation exercises, or monitoring oxygen for someone with respiratory issues. The biggest one we're coming up to is financial and employment issues. So financial concerns may be something like where you have to pay out of pocket for expenses for medications, equipment, or home modifications, and struggling to afford respite care. And for other people, it might be a co-payment for a person who's living in long-term care. With the employment issues, I hear this so often, having to leave work early to for a doctor appointment, or using vacation time for caregiving duties. And this is a big one, lack of employer flexibility. The legal and administrative responsibility, caregivers often will manage paperwork and legal decisions. So, for example, applying for benefits, disability tax credit, caregiver benefits, establishing who's going to be the power of attorney for finances or care, managing insurance claims, and for passport program for adults over 18 with a developmental disability. So there's lots that's not just providing personal care, but there's lots that's going on as well. And this is the one that is very frustrating for a lot of folks. It's the gaps in health and community support services. So many caregivers will struggle with things like needed services. Either they don't exist, those services, they have long wait lists, or there are shortages, it's too expensive, or it may not even be available in your areas. For example, if you live in a rural area. The next one we talk about, this one is really touches my heart as a coach, because this is something we often deal with coaches, is the emotional and mental health strain. So the stress that comes from providing care is often a 24/7 responsibility with little predictability. And the burnout often occurs when the demands are constantly exceed the caregiver's emotional or physical capacity without proper adequate support. Then we get into some of these. These are some of the bigger feelings. So anger, guilt, and resentment. And these are emotions are common but often hidden, as sometimes caregivers feel guilty if they feel them. So here's an example of anger. Anger towards the care recipient's illness itself. Anger at the loss of personal freedom. Guilt may look something like, I feel guilty if I want to have some time off, or guilty for having been impatient, guilt in considering a stay in a long-term care facility. Resentment, this is a big one as well. The feeling that one's life plans you've been put on hold, or watching your friends enjoy the freedoms that are no longer available to you. Risks of anxiety and depression. Again, caregivers are prone to anxiety and depression due to the prolonged exposure of the stress. And so anxiety can come in thoughts like this: oh, I can't stop the racing thoughts at night, which causes some sleepless nights. Depression can manifest in that persistent veil of sadness, and often the depression is often associated with an overlook because caregivers focus on the needs of the person they're caring for and miss their own. Related to the depression is looking at some of the losses that people may not recognize. The loss of a relationship as it once was. For example, a parent no longer recognizing their child. Loss of personal identity. Well, I'm just a caregiver now. I've just become a caregiver. Loss of independence, similar to the with the working, is that they feel like they've had to quit work and they lose their professional identity fades. Loss of future plans, canceled trips, postponed retirement, abandoned dreams. And then there's something that's called ambiguous loss, because this can occur when a person is physically present but psychologically absent. And that can happen sometimes with dementia, a person with experiencing mental health difficulties. Um, Another example that we talk about here is social isolation. Caregivers often withdraw from their social activities. They can feel sometimes invisible and have a lack of support. And why we're doing this whole thing today comes because of family conflicts. Caregiving can really complicate relationships. For example, criticism by family members who live far away and they don't get your day-to-day. Understanding some of the family dynamics as well. So family relationships refer to the patterns of interactions, relationships, and emotional bonds that can develop with over time. And again, culture can be a big factor um, as well. And the other thing that's important to recognize here is that healthy family dynamics are characterized by open communication, mutual respect, supportive relationships, fostering an environment where members feel valued and understood. In contrast, we have the dysfunctional side of the negative interactions, such as frequent conflicts, poor communication, and lack of emotional support. And what happens in these unhealthy patterns, they can lead to long-term emotional and psychological issues for all families involved. I want to talk a little bit about the roles within the family. We talk about the primary caregiver. So the primary caregiver, this is very interesting. And sometimes it's a chosen role. The person wants to do that. Or it can be assigned based on birth gender. You're the firstborn, you're the son, or gender, or you're the only girl in the family, proximity, or availability. Well, you just live around the corner from mom. For example, you're retired, we're still working. So that might be define a little bit of the primary caregiver. An example of a secondary caregiving role might be filled by a brother who allows the parents to rest by spending time with their sibling who has a disability. The decision-making role is not necessarily always assigned to the primary caregiver. It could be someone else who might hold power of attorney for finances or care. And the emotional support, sometimes I get this from where a sister might be the primary caregiver, but their sister who lives far away calls regularly and provides emotional support. And note that poorly defined roles can create tension within families. The impact on families, relationships. There could be strengthened bonds, and in these bonds, that's where the positive side comes in. Is that when you have these strengthened bonds in the family, where was I going with this? Yeah, strengthened bonds can actually bring people together. When we have some things such as role strain or conflict, just as earlier described, these are the things that can impact on the family as well. When we're talking about changes in communication patterns, especially when it comes to caregiving, there might be something where you're not conveying something important, not able to convey something important. There's expectations and assumptions that are had at this point. And the same thing can happen when we're talking about shifts in power and responsibility. This can happen where sometimes an adult child now takes over for the parents' finances and medical responses, leaving the parents sometimes feeling that their child might be invading their space and overtaking their lives. I'd like to show you a little bit here of a video here, and this video demonstrates a caregiver is torn between her brother Chris and living with Down syndrome and her partner. When her partner blurts out a cruel remark about her brother being a burden, the godmother arrives on the scene. So let's take a look at this.
The painting class is canceled today. No one is mad. I'll call you later. Sorry I'm so late. Chris is having a tricky day.
Uh-huh.
Come on, he's my brother.
Well, we lost the reservation.
No big deal. We can order in.
It was a big deal to me. This guy is consuming your life and mine.
That's unfair. You're making it out as though I have a choice.
Well, how long are we gonna have to live like this?
What did you just say?
How long are we gonna have to live like this?
Wow,
Jeez,
that was like a category 5. Classic thing not to say to a caregiver.
who are you? What is going on here? What did you do to my wife?
Don't worry, she's taking a well-deserved break. I'm her carry godmother. Like a fairy godmother, but sassier, and exclusively for caregivers. You and I need to have a little chat. But first,
Come on. Come on.
do you need a burp? Does a baby need a bottle?
Okay, all right, I was a jerk, but really? This is humiliating.
Oh, really? And you don't think that she's humiliated sometimes? Canceling plans, constantly apologizing, managing to put everyone else's needs before her own, and you throw a little tantrum at the most minor of inconveniences.
I didn't throw a tantrum.
Really?
It's just... I just miss her.
See, that's real. You can say that and participate.
Yeah, that was pretty awful.
Let's fix that. Oh, you can have your needs too. Just don't turn into a giant baby when things don't go your way. You got me?
I got you.
All right. Well, let's try that again, shall we?
Hey. That was awful. I shouldn't have said that. I just...
I gotta take this. Hi, Chris. Hi.
You're up, kid. Get the phone!
Can I try? Hey, Chris.
With caregivers, it isn't just their time that gets stretched, it's their relationships too. They're not choosing one person over another, they're just doing their best to be there for everyone.
Let me share this particular quote, and we'll be doing a little bit of speaking about canoes. So if the family were a boat, it would be a canoe. That makes no progress unless everyone is paddling or everyone paddles. The canoe is a family system. So canoe is interconnected and responsible to every movement, just like a family during caregiving. For example, if one person shifts, suddenly everyone feels it in the canoe. If one paddles hard while another stops, the canoe will spin. If no one communicates, the canoe drifts. And caregiving magnifies this reality. Roles shift, emotions run high, and balance becomes fragile. All families who are concerned or impacted by caregiving decisions should be considered regardless of the distance, personality, or limited resources. Even those who may be difficult, argumentative, or rarely visit should not be excluded. Involving everyone in creating caregiving plans and making decisions fosters support and reduces the likelihood of conflicts or undermining later on. Strategies for paddling in the same direction. So where are you headed? It's important to agree on destination, that is on your goals and how to balance the workload. A realistic division of responsibilities and rotation are essential. The goal of these meetings is not to resolve long-time family issues, but rather to ensure that everyone is on the same team and to sort out what needs to be done. Conflicts arise when priorities aren't shared. Family meetings are also opportunity for current concerns to be aired and miscommunication to be cleared up. So it's good to meet regularly, to clarify expectations, to name and validate emotions, and most of all, to avoid making assumptions. I wanted to share that this is a tool that I have used as a coach, is creating a family agenda before you even have the meeting, because creating an agenda can help reduce the intentional intensity, maintain productive discussion, encourages participation by asking each family to share their concerns. You can stay focused by staying on what the current situation is about rather than on personalities. make sure that everyone has an equal voice and can express their feelings, honestly clarify roles. And again, this idea of having a template, you get to document and prepare in writing the outlines for everyone's responsibilities and when they will be carried out. And again, when it comes to the canoe, if everyone all sits on one side, then the canoe tips. And so just the idea here is, again, to look at tasks realistically. But I want to just tap on this idea of recognizing invisible labor, because not all caregiving is physical, as seeing someone driving someone to an appointment. The invisible work is still paddling, things like scheduling appointments or managing insurance paperwork, researching care options, anticipating needs before they're voiced. And again, sometimes even absorbing the tension and providing emotional support. That's still work in the family. Again, it's important that you be adaptable. You do not fight the current head on. You angle the canoe and adjust your stroke. Caregiving has similar changes. Health can decline, finances shift, and emotions fluctuate. So be prepared to revisit and stay with plans. Not paddling in the same direction. So when the canoe finds itself in a crisis situation, one person is paddling backwards, someone is dragging their paddle through the water, creating resistance. And if the canoe isn't moving forward efficiently, it can drift towards the shore, the weeds, the rocks, and no one is steering. So the canoe may tip over, fill with water, or even sink. Similarly, families can find themselves in a crisis, and they too have a tipping point. One family may feel overwhelmed, another one shirk their responsibilities. The person receiving care may feel a sense of lost control, and be aware of those old family patterns and grudges that may resurface. So in the event that this may happen, recommend appointing a professional paddler, because family meetings are not always easy. Decision-making is most difficult if family members have never discussed their feelings or past issues, or if conflict already exists. So when family members come together after years of separation, old conflicts, like I said, can reemerge, especially around relationships, family roles, and expectations. And sometimes in family conflicts, there are hidden resentments that are likely to prevent having a rational discussion around decision-making. So check out somebody who has professional guidance, a counselor, a healthcare or social professional, private manager, private care manager, members of the clergy, a mediator, and even someone like ourselves who are coaches at Ontario Caregiver Organization. So a professional may be able to facilitate the family meeting and provide objectivity. Without someone steering that canoe, remember, things can drift. And in this slide here, I'm finishing up my canoe analogy, is to just know that when you paddle in sync, requires everyone's feeling the rhythm and not being overpowered. So validate one another, offer appreciation, and practice patience. And finally, no one is untouched by a caregiving journey. We sink or are steadied together. Forward movement requires cooperation. Balance requires awareness. Self-care is essential, and the goal isn't speed, it's shared arrival. So in caregiving, this canoe metaphor teaches that success isn't about strong paddler, it's about relationship coordination. In summary, healthy and healing coping strategies is to maintain open communications and to use I statements to express needs and feelings, and watch the you statements. For example, instead of saying, "You never help with dad," try saying with an I statement, "I feel overwhelmed when I can't manage dad's appointments alone." This reduces defensiveness and encourages construction dialogue. Example, avoid saying, "You should visit dad more often," to something like, "I would appreciate if you could spend more time with dad." Again, this keeps guilt and resentment out of conversations. Communicating these boundaries help prevent burnout and resentment. Respect differing perspectives. Have clear boundaries to protect your time. Oh yes, your energy and your well-being. Allow grace. Have practice compassion and patience and understanding for one another. And share opportunities for respite. Rotate your caregiver duties and provide support when needed. This can help prevent burnout and keep the whole family healthy. And finally, consider attending a peer mentoring support group, using coaching or counseling. Because in a support group, for example, hearing from others who face similar challenges normalizes your feelings and provides practical energies. So that's all for my part. And I'd like to take this time to introduce my colleague who's been sharing this experience with me, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Brenda, and thank you to everybody for coming. I've been looking at everything people have been putting in the chat. And I know you learned a little bit about me from Susan at the beginning, and I just wanted to just further connect to my my recent retirement from teaching. A majority of that part of my teaching was in special education. And that is the first time that I actually stopped to look at family dynamics and caregivers. And I got to meet a lot of different caregivers and different roles. There were parents, grandparents, mothers, fathers, siblings. And within those settings, I acknowledged the different roles, and to myself, I would think about them afterwards. And that really was my first introduction to actually seeing how family dynamics can unfold in the education setting, and how a family coming together to advocate it. Now I reflect, after going through everything I've gone through, that it really is a complex. They really are complex dynamics. So I understand, Brenda, that you have some questions for me that we're going to guide through, and I'd be happy to go ahead with that. Thank you.
So can you share a time in your story when your family dynamic became challenging, and what made that situation particularly difficult?
Well, as with any family, the family changes. The people come and go within. There could be changes in the physical and mental health of everybody within a family. Members can leave, new members can come, members are born, and there's lots of different changes within a family. So I'm going to just specifically speak about my two boys today and that dynamic. And when I speak about that, it will be from my perspective as my oldest son's caregiver. I was obviously a parent to both boys, but I was also a caregiver. And those are two distinctly different roles. And that is something that I learned, and I was able to really give thought to the two different roles. So as my youngest son was going through all of his changes, and I was his parent, there was the other component of that I was the primary caregiver to his brother and all of his complex needs. And that dynamic between brothers was something that I held on to. And as a parent, that was so important to me, to keep them as brothers. Was it challenging? Absolutely. I can give a specific example where my youngest son was having a birthday party, his first big birthday party, and we had a pool, and it was the best thing ever, and everybody wanted to come. And of course, his older brother was invited because he was there. And it was so hard on my younger brother, on my younger son, because his friends were making fun of his older brother. And obviously, this was hard on my youngest son, too. However, I made sure I took him aside and said, "This is your brother. And brothers do not let other brothers make fun of each other, no matter their needs." I did not get into anything about his medical and everything that happened. But this is what it means to have a sibling. And we kind of forgot about the other part of it. And because that was my focus, the caregiving was my job. That was my job with his older brother. And yes, the effects on the family dynamic were huge. But I always wanted to make sure that the two boys respected each other, no matter who came in and out of our family, and all the changes within every individual of our family. I wanted to make sure that We established that. And there were a lot of difficult times with that because of the immaturity of my youngest son. He was growing up. And and if we go back to the canoe analogy, children are always paddling in the opposite way of their parents usually. So I was always trying to bring that dynamic, knowing the dynamic I had with my brother was challenging too, with no complexities there. So playing those two roles is another added complexity to the role of a parent and a caregiver.
Okay. So again, there might be some other, like you said, family dynamics. So this was with your boys. So how did you and your family navigate like experience? Were there other people involved? Maybe what worked well, what didn't work well, or what did you hope for?
Well, I hope that people would work with me within the family dynamics that I wanted, but I didn't always do this very well, but in looking back on it, I did the best I could. But making sure that everybody knew what my goal as a parent was between these two boys. So if you were going to weigh in, as so many people like to do within a family, then it would have to be based on the fact that I was separating the caregiving. I never said to my youngest son to feel sorry for his brother. I said, this is your brother.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
And there's a lot of different things that you might not like about him, but there's a lot of different things I don't like about my brother. So, and I would talk to him about the things that he didn't like. But this was the most challenging thing to me, is when others would come in and they wouldn't see my goals and see my purpose and think that we should do something different. And I know all of you, and I'm seeing in the chat too, is when you're looking at the dynamics and what if there's only one person in the canoe, and I get all of that. And that's what I felt so many times. But I would correct those people, because this is the way this family dynamic is. So if you want to be a part of these conversations, you need to respect that.
Okay. And so
it always works.
there you go. I was going to say, looking back, and I'll drop this as well. What lessons did you learn that might help other caregivers going through similar situations? And I want to speak to the fact that you were a busy mom and a caregiver. And I want to see where did you come in with self-care in all that?
Well, I used to always not like the term self-care. I used to not like a lot of things when I was a caregiver and working full-time. And anger was one of the big that you showed in the one slide. That was something that always came out, and I can see that in frustration. But the one thing that I did learn slowly, with a lot of help and working with professionals, is that self-care doesn't have to look like a day at a spa. Self-care doesn't have to look at, because that's what other people who aren't caregivers and parents and working full-time might be able to get to do. So that would be wonderful for all of us. I know we would love that. But self-care can be, this is what I started with, simply at a stoplight, a red light. I would push my shoulders down, because like most caregivers, they were up to my ears all the time in fight or flight. Cortisol, I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. Bring it on. But I would push my shoulders down, and I would take 3 deep breaths, or as many as I could, until the light changed. When I did drive in Toronto, I had time to do about 10 breaths sometimes, but I would push my shoulders down and I would take deep breaths. And there are a lot of strategies that are simple like that. And when I worked with caregivers later on, a lot of people would say, I don't have time for self-care. Well, absolutely. I get that totally. But it doesn't have to look at that simple. Complex. It's not being able to have an hour-long bath and with bubbles and candles and all the things that we wish. That would be great if you have time for that. But simply just resetting yourself to the moment and resetting yourself back to being in the moment. And I don't want to get into a lot of mindfulness here, but that is one thing that I've explored a lot. It takes a while to figure out what works for you, but it's all about simply taking those breaths, taking those deep breaths or whatever worked for you. I explored things like tapping. Never heard of it. Different types of breathing. There's so many different things that it might take a while, but the resources are out there on the OCO website and other places. And I just found that that was my idea of self-care. And when I started some of those, I challenged the people running them. I don't have time. I don't have time. Don't give me anything that I don't have time for. And they acknowledge that, and we all say that here. But just, it doesn't have to be like simply one of my colleagues that I do co-facilitating with just walks out their front door and stands and brings in nature and experience nature. Would she love to go for a long walk? Sure. But some days she can, some days she can't. But when she feels that spiral starting, or I always used to give the example of the hamster wheel, going on the hamster wheel, jump off for 30 seconds and explore those strategies. And also, the one thing that I'm still learning is give yourself some grace. Don't think that and you mentioned it too, Brenda, but don't feel that you've got to fix it. I remember somebody told me, it took you 23 years to get to where you are at in your burnout. It took you 23 years of navigating family dynamics and having them come in and out and always always having to be the steerer of the canoe, and always. And as much as I wanted to put boundaries up, and as much as I knew, okay, I should put boundaries up, nobody else was jumping on board to take control of that. So that's where I think you need to give, like, I know when I started to give myself grace, which is my favorite word. I just love the word because it just gives yourself that it's okay. It's okay to not like your family one day, or even longer. It's okay to not like your role. It's okay not to like all of those things because they're not fun all the time and it's not good all the time. So yes, I did things with my boys that weren't good because I was stressed. I was burned out. And I know every parent does that, but it's magnified when you're a caregiver. Mm-hmm. So because of those two roles, and acknowledge those two roles, you're not only a daughter, you're a daughter and a caregiver. You're not only a wife or a husband, you're a wife or a husband and a caregiver. And those two roles are separated. And that's what I really, sometimes they blend all in together. But I really felt that when I could separate them, I was a better advocate for my son. And I don't mean better, I should have said more efficient advocate for my son. And also for my children together. And we even had other children come into our family. And they blended in as siblings. And we don't use terms like step and things like that because we're all one family. So now we have 4 siblings and that dynamic. And as I was saying at the beginning, it's always changing. Mm-hmm. And because each individual is changing. But your role as a parent, spouse, whatever your role is within a family is always changing. And also, so is your role as a caregiver.
Very good. Yes. Thank you so much for giving us some insight in that. And so self-care is very important. So um, I think we're ready to open the questions or comments to this situation.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Brenda and Jennifer. I will say it's been a very busy chat box, and I just want to thank our participants for being very engaged and also supporting one another. There's been a lot of good advice throughout the chat. Really appreciate everybody being engaged. There were a couple things that have come up, and some you've already asked and addressed it, but I think it's important to reiterate. First of all, the canoe analogy has really stuck with our participants. Any overarching advice that you have? I mean, some great some great comments from the chat about, there's holes or somebody's not paddling forwards or backwards. What are some general, tips or advice that you have for family members to kind of build and sustain a strong foundation for any, because the caregiving journey goes up and down. How do you maintain that stability throughout it?
I think I'll just take that one on. I think one of the things too that because I've recently done a really great situation where there was a lot of conflict in the families, there was estrangement, there was a whole bunch of things, and just using that tool of having an agenda because it keeps the focus on that, not what the brother-in-law is doing, the sister-in-law. So having something where and you let the agenda do the speaking, and if someone gets off topic, and normally there's someone in the family that might want to direct that to be like the facilitator. So having that tool of having an agenda can be very helpful with pulling people in. It's not going to settle things where, if Jimmy and Sally fought when they, didn't like each other when they're younger, well, it's not going may not change in adulthood. But it's the idea like, what is the common goal? What are you there for? And then the idea too is that even to allow everybody to have a voice and nobody has a nobody's opinion is right or wrong. It's just part of the discussion. So using that as a tool, and there's some really great facilitators in families that aren't necessarily they just do that very well. Yeah.
And I just add on to what
Yeah.
Brenda said there. I also be honest. Be honest. The communication coming from others might not be what you want to hear, but be honest and say, you know what? Like I remember saying to my youngest, you know what? I didn't like that either today.
Yeah.
Like that was hard, but reminding them that this, or my husband, or my father, or my mother, anybody that was there within an experience that was very challenging. And I had to go into the caregiver role and be immersed in that. And just saying, I didn't like it either, but keeping it focused on the disease or the diagnosis or instead of focusing on the person. And I remember that in education too, with teachers, I would be saying, no, you can't say that you don't like that person. That just doesn't work for me. It's the disease. And the more that I repeated that within the family and also showed them, do you think I'm loving this every day? I didn't like it either. And but it's not them. And that's why I always focus. This is your brother.
Mm-hmm.
Love it or hate it, this is your brother. And you are lucky that you have a brother that loves you so much. A little smothering at times, maybe, but that is his way. So respecting that, and then with all the other dynamics too, and the other people within the family.
Yeah, no, thank you both. And I wanted to build on that too, because there's been a sort of a thread of comments from our participants about the unique relationship with siblings in that caregiving situation. Personally, I'm very, very fortunate. I have a sibling. We're both caregivers to a parent, but it's gone through ups and downs. And so I wondered, I'll start with you, Brenda, like any advice that you have, because obviously going into this, and we know it's a disease and it's, but it definitely impacts, as you said, the relationship between siblings, and anything you wanted to comment to help, some of our participants out there who are having very challenging situations with a sibling when they're co-caregiving, for example.
Yeah, sometimes I guess this happened in my situation where it was like my brother and myself, and it was always like when we got together, mom and dad, mom and dad. And one day we decided that let's just preserve our relationship. Let's have a mom and dad free zone, and let's talk about each other. Let's go out, let's have coffee together. One of the things was like when and I said, tell me about your kids, how things are going. So we had this time where we just spent an hour talking about what's going on in each other's lives by putting mom and dad on the back burner, because every time we got together it was about mom or dad, and we agreed on something, we disagreed, and what are you doing, and it just became too consuming for us, and the relationship started to shift a little bit. Another thing too as well is that sometimes when families get together, like during holidays, we have Easter coming up. Sometimes that's an opportunity where you just enjoy the holiday as best you can. And yes, we know that there's this veil of caregiving that's in front of everything, but just being able to acknowledge that, yes, we know we're in a caregiving role, but just looking at um, celebrating the relationships as you are with your siblings. And you may not get along with everybody, but you might be able to have a conversation with each one individually. Yeah.
That's really helpful. And I was going to say, and I want to ask you something related to roles, Jennifer, because you talked about, parent, caregiver. I mean, spouse. I mean, how do you and sometimes the caregiving role can, take over, and how do you manage because at the end of the day, I mean, you're Jennifer, right? But you're juggling all these roles. And so for those of our participants who have multiple roles, like what is again, I know you answered a bit of it, but what is your advice to those who are kind of juggling those different roles,
Oh,
recognizing they all have different relationships? Yeah.
oh, if I could, I'd give everyone a hug because there's advice that I could give, but honestly, it's it's because I've kind of come out the other side for all the wrong reasons and losing my son. However, um, I just find that again, you need to bring yourself back into the present and understand something is not working for you in that moment. That dynamic is not working for you, and you're the one steering the ship. So having that, knowing that you're juggling so many roles, you need to acknowledge what role you need to take at that moment, and be vocal and be honest and show your vulnerability, because when you do that, I have found the reception is okay. Well, she's not thinking that she does this all better than us, and that nobody can help her son at anywhere close to what she's doing, and other people in the family may be trying. And so also focusing that on that you have all those, and I called them, I got all these juggling balls up. Another quick analogy that worked for me in that was most people wake up with an empty cup and they fill it up with everything they do during the day. A caregiver who is also a worker, spouse, all of the above, they already have their cup half full before they even wake up. So that is something that in separating those roles and making sure that you acknowledge when those roles are going to help you. And when you're in situations that you are uncomfortable with, acknowledge that. And it's okay. It's okay not to like this. It's okay not to like this person. It's okay not to like what they said. That's okay. But let's focus on how you can make it better for you in that moment. Not change them,
Right.
but make it better for you in that moment. And then you are able to take on the appropriate role easier. Practice what I preach. I'm still working on it myself, and I still will be for a very long time.
No, I totally appreciate that, Jennifer. And while we're talking about roles, we've talked a lot about being a caregiver, to a parent or to a child. We've had some of our participants talk about, being a caregiver to a spouse, and that's kind of a unique challenge in itself, and how to manage the family dynamics in that situation. Is there anything, Brenda, that you wanted to share about that unique kind of relationship and how it might impact family dynamics when you're caring for a spouse?
Well, as a daughter watching my parents, I saw my mom, she had dementia, and my dad had end stage FNZ, and he was trying to be her caregiver. And as a family, we had said, what are they going? We watched them communicate with each other, and it was very difficult to say because and we had people like we'd have my mom complaining to all of us about my dad, or we'd have my dad complaining to me about my mom. But what I saw in their dynamics was very interesting. When my brother and we came in, we said, "Hey, we're going to help you, and we're going to," and we set up all these things. All of a sudden, the two of them, even in their weakness with their own conditions, they kind of got this energy pulled together, and they said, well, no, we don't want your help. We're like, what? We're like, really? And so what I saw in their marriage was this, is that, and this is what my brother said. He says, I know it's difficult to watch mom and dad, but he says it's their vows. It's, for better, for worse, in sickness and in health. So don't interfere with that. So it's difficult to watch them to have those difficulties. But when it comes to the spousal relationship, it's that there are expectations and there's grief that's involved. And sometimes unacknowledged grief appears as stress, appears as anxiety. But if the grief of like we're not the same anymore, we're missing out on our intimacy. So there's this whole thing about this kind of loss that happens, and I think acknowledging the loss in that. Now, if and especially with something with dementia, but if it's something where there are specific, we'll say, conditions that have support groups just to help out couples as well. And they can, if there might be, say, somebody has kidney disease, well, then there's some that can, there's some support within that foundation or within that organization that can actually help couples with communication. They'll hear what the caregiver spouse has to say, and there can be absolute opportunities for counseling. But to try and do it alone can be very difficult. And so I think an outside help would be recommended there.
And thanks for that, Brenda, because that's actually a really good segue to my final question to you both. We're getting close to time, but I wanted to give you both an opportunity to give some kind of closing thoughts. And some of the comments that are coming in, really, we talked about juggling. You have all these roles. It's obviously impacting, you mentioned that one slide with your affecting your mental health. And how do you best balance? I know we kind of talked about balancing and you alluded to some supports, but can you share again with our participants, what is some advice, formal, informal supports for those who are trying to juggle and manage their own mental health at the same time? Jennifer, I'm going to start with you and then I'll go to Brenda.
Well, thank you. Yes, that's a very good question because um, I I've seen a lot of questions also that are around that in the chat, and the juggling is possibly the hardest because you can't give up one role because you just don't want to do it. It's there. It's who you are. You have to work or do those other roles. I have really found, and yes, my caregiving role has changed because my son is no longer with us. But just touching on what Brenda has said, there's always transitions within families' caregiving roles, and each transition brings with it some grief or joy, but it's a transition, so it's change. And I feel that we, with that many roles that we have, feel those transitions much deeper. And that is where we have to, I know what's worked for me is doing those little things to where you start to feel the heaviness and the void and you're, oh my gosh, I got to do this and this and this and this. And then it's a spiral. And no longer a juggling, but a spiral. And that is I find when we bring ourselves back to that present and to be in the present, not thinking about the future, not thinking about the past and bringing all, those are just feelings and thoughts and emotions. We need to try and just deal with the facts in the moment, acknowledge how you're feeling, make it that you are okay with how you're feeling, give yourself grace, accept it, not in the way that you will say, okay, I accept it that that person's not helping me. It's more you accept it in the moment for what it is And then you, I find, can be much more effective in trying to move forward with what you need to do in that role. I remember going to work and bringing everything from the night before with me, sometimes sleeping in a hospital chair, and then getting up and going to work the next morning. And I wasn't very good at it back then. And I would try to just, I'm standing in front of these groups of kids who have no idea what's going on in my life. And having that role is trying to just, okay, I'm here now. This is my job now. And knowing that I will have a different role soon when I walk outside of this room. But that to me is where I was the most effective, and using strategies to do that.
Yes. And I'll just say a couple of three things that just can help with some mental health, because sometimes it's even something like chugging things down or getting down to self-care is just sometimes about basic needs. When I'm working with a caregiver, sometimes I'll say, do you take the time even to go to the washroom? Do you take the time to have a glass of water?
Shower.
Even looking, yeah, shower, even looking at those basic needs. The other thing I'll do is working with somebody who they've been just gave so much of everything, just trying to bring back a small something for themselves. And it might even be something like chunking things down. What is it that you would like to get back to, but you haven't been able to? I can't read a book. So then I'll work with that person. I'll say, where can we find a piece of time? And normally we can find something to do that. And the final thing I want to say is that like when others don't know what to do, they don't know how to help the caregiver. So one of the things that I had was a strategy of putting a list up on the fridge, and it says giving the gift of time or gift of yourself. And it would be something like, John, mow the lawn. John will be here on Saturday. And then they know they're not just giving they'll know that they're giving the caregiver a gift of time and a gift of themselves, which is so invaluable. So that's another way of looking at how to involve other people to help take some of that burden off of you.
Yeah, that really resonates, and I hope it's helpful to our participants. Thank you so much, Brenda and Jennifer.
Pleasure.
The time has flown by,
Thank you.
and
Wow.
you can hopefully can have a look at the chat. People are, expressing their thanks as well.